Hello, Nathan.
Hello, Greg. Hello, everybody out there watching on the internets. My name is Nate Swick. I am joined by my ABA colleague, Greg Neise. Welcome once again to our biweekly What's This Bird live program. We're excited to have you here. If you are a first time watcher, I know we've got a few folks who came over from an email blast that our colleague David Hartley sent out over the ABA ABA newsletter feed. What we do here every couple of weeks is that we come on and essentially talk through some bird identifications and take some questions from all y'all out there. The ABA hosts a couple of Facebook groups, ABA Rare Bird Alert primarily, and What's This Bird? What's This Bird is a crowdsourced bird identification community. People take their photos and videos and sound files and they post them up on the Facebook wall. And then our friendly community of birders identifies those. And so what we do here every couple of weeks is we grab a few photos from that group and we'll talk through with Greg. But before we get that, we're going to let some folks come in. Greg, how's birding going here in the midsummer in
It's
the northern
land of
hemisphere?
the land of limpkins, my friend. The land of
It
limpkins.
absolutely is. I thought Hot Limpkin Summer was about to come to an end there a
Oh
couple
no,
weeks
it's
ago,
just
and then
getting
we got a
started.
whole new batch of Limpkin records this week, including Illinois' fifth, Missouri's eighth, and Wisconsin's first
Second.
and second.
Yeah.
First, because we didn't report the first. The first one was suppressed, and the second one
Yep.
came out. But apparently there are two, because where there's one Limpkin, there is always a lot more, as seems to
I
be the case. What's the deal with all these
yeah.
Limpkins, Greg?
Well, it's mystery snails.
Mystery
You know,
snails. Yeah.
it's the aquarium snails, and well, and but they also eat freshwater mussels. Um,
Yeah, that's what they do when they come into North Carolina. I guess we don't have as many mystery snails, or we have a lot more mussels. I'm not sure exactly which it is,
I
but
I
one of
think that
those.
in the south, in the peripheries of their normal range, and I'm just surmising. There's no study that's been done yet, but I'm
Yeah.
surmising that the mystery snails are really common in the aquarium trade.
Hmm.
They are out there. There's lots of them, and the birds are finding a new food source and they're spreading. And then once they get beyond that, they're like, oh, you know what? These freshwater mussels are just
Might
fine.
as well stay. They're fine. Yeah. What a lot of people don't know about the Southeast is that we have incredible bivalve diversity. Some of
Mm-hmm.
the best on the planet, best bivalve diversity on the planet in terms of freshwater mussels. Now, to you and me, who perhaps are not up in the ways of identifying mussels. They all pretty much look the same, but there are I'm told by mussel bivalve biologists that there's a lot of really cool stuff out there. I don't know. I look at them probably the same way that they look at me when I talk about shorebirds, but there's a lot of mussels here for limpkins. But they do seem to like those snails, and the limpkins are funny because they will move into a place and then they'll just start nesting there, like
Yeah.
they did in Louisiana, where
Well,
I don't know, 10 years ago there were no limpkins in Louisiana, and then they started showing up, and then they decided to stick around, and now they're shooting up the Mississippi River and turning up in all these places.
and like black-bellied whistling ducks, which we were talking about just before we went on air here.
Yeah,
That's another species like a neotropic cormorant, but the black-bellied whistling ducks. Yeah, it wasn't that long ago that I spent 4 hours in a car going to see my first uh, sighting of black-bellied whistling duck in Illinois,
yeah,
and now they breed here. I mean,
yeah.
it's an expected spring migrant and an expected breeder in very small numbers.
Yeah, I'm,
Um,
I'm the same way. I got my first North Carolina State black-billed whistling duck that was one county over in Alamance County, hanging out at a golf course pond. And then last summer, um, I chased a pair of black-billed whistling ducks that were, not close to my house in my county, because I got to get that county bird, and ended up finding roseate spoonbills there too.
mhm.
So we're turning into Florida, I guess.
Yeah, and I got to take a second here to say hi to Mia. Hi, Mia, one of
Yeah,
our,
hello
our
everybody.
regulars.
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
we're,
if I'm
we're
gonna take it. So
please.
if you guys who are watching, You guys who are take a drink. I'll take care of this for the moment. You guys who are watching on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, we're watching the comments. So if you have any comments,
That's exactly what I was.
and if you have any questions, we'll break off what we're doing and we'll try to get to them as best as we can.
Absolutely.
And so if you've got something you want to say or a question, let us have it, and we'll do our best.
Yeah. Before we get rolling, we would like to say that this is a program, an effort by the American Birding Association, of which Greg and I are both staff members here. The ABA is a membership organization. If you enjoy these sorts of programs, these sorts of community events, please consider supporting the ABA with your membership. There's a link right there above Greg, aba.org/join. We'd love to have you as part of our
and without giving away too much, I'm going to say there's a lot of really cool things that are happening right now that are going to gel in the next year or less. And this is a good time to become an ABA member because there's a lot of fun stuff that's about to happen. And you can get in on the ground floor rather than being, the kid who stumbles into class late and has no idea what's going on.
We'll still take you. You don't get like a tardy.
Of course. But, and we'll catch you up to speed. So don't worry about that.
Right. So Greg has perused the What's This Bird group, and he has pulled up a few bird photos that we can talk about a little bit here. We one of the cool things about What's This Bird is that we tend to see seasonal movements through the people who post their confusing birds on What's This Bird. In the midsummer we get a lot of shorebirds and multi-common birds and migrating, the first migrating birds coming back south again. And in a lot of those cases, those are birds that kind of look a little bit different. And so hopefully you'll be able to get some stuff you can take away and take into the birding that is happening right outside your door right now. Greg.
And spring migration fall migration is on.
It is on.
And shorebirds have been moving for some time, but warblers are now starting to show up. Where I'm at in Metro Chicago, we're starting to see things like Magnolia Warbler and bay-breasted warbler, which breed a good distance to the north of us here. And perusing What's This Bird, I see similar things where people are starting to see migrant warblers and other birds. So, now if you've taken the summer off, get out and bird.
Yeah, it's a good time of year to even see your common birds in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. We get a lot of kind of post-breeding movement or short distance movement with a lot of our warblers. Hooded warbler down here is sort of, I live in the Southeast. Hooded warbler is a common breeding bird across the entirety of the state for the most part. But, you start seeing them in little places that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Usually it's a bird of kind of mixed forest with a lot of undergrowth. But you start seeing them in weird places now because these are just the birds that are starting to do these little short distance jumps, getting ready for migration to happen. So be on the lookout there, even in places where migration isn't really in the full swing yet. There's a lot of bird movement going on.
And one other thing along that line, before we dive into the photos here, if you're south of their breeding range or not in their breeding range, if you see a water thrush right now, it's most likely going to be Louisiana, because that's a species that moves out of the ABA area for the most part in August. It gets up and leaves.
Enjoy them for the next 2 weeks because they'll be pretty well gone, except for South Florida,
be gone,
which is weird for a lot of reasons.
There'll be a little break in water thrushes, and then pretty much everything you see will be in northern.
Well, Greg, enough chatter. Let's get to the birds.
There's never enough chatter. There's never enough chatter.
Bird chatter.
I know.
Enough vamping. A lot of vamping.
Speaking of which, here we go.
Yeah, let's start with the fall warblers, what Roger Torrey Peterson erroneously, in my view, called confusing fall warblers, because with the exception of a handful of species pairs, which can be kind of tough from time to time, for the most part, fall warblers look more or less like their spring counterparts. A little more washed out, but a lot of the field marks that you focus on in the spring are going to be there in the fall if you look close enough. So this is a classic fall warbler. It's in those kind of weedy grasses. Oh man, those are great places to kick up fall birds this time of year.
Absolutely, those weedy patches right along the edges of the woods. Um, the edges are always a great place to go birding. And if you have, like even old construction sites or whatever,
Hmm.
where there's weedy patches along the edge of the woods, the warblers will come down and pick insects out of the tops of the forbs like this. And all right, so this one, it looks like it looks like the confusing fall warbler, generic
I
confusing
guess
fall
so.
warbler from Earl
Yeah,
Peterson. It's
this is a
yellow
good
underneath,
generic fall warbler. Yeah,
gray in the back.
yeah,
But it does have some things going on there that are
yeah.
rather.
Yeah, you definitely want to focus on when you get fall warblers, things like wing bars and eye rings are really good places to sort of focus. And you can see a broken kind of off-white eye ring on this bird. You can see a little bit of streaking there on the breast. It's got a relatively compact build for a warbler, and it's got some wing bars, right? They're kind of
A little bit,
obscured there
yeah,
by the plant, but it does have some wing
yeah.
bars. Um, it's got a yellow undertail. Undertail is a good thing to focus on when
Yeah.
you're looking at fall warblers as well.
The th-
In a kind of a relatively stubby black bill.
the thing that I'm seeing here that really jumps out to me though is the face pattern, and
Hmm.
the face pattern. We've got this yellow throat that kind of hooks under the auricular, which is the cheek patch or
Yeah,
ear
the back of
patch.
the ear. Yeah.
Um, but then right below that, there's a little gray spur that comes out, and that's plumage, and that is, as Nate said a moment ago, that the fall warblers often have a um, a strong suggestion of the breeding
Hmm.
plumage, and this bird does that. If you squint at it and then look in your field guide at an adult breeding prairie warbler, you will see
Hmm.
that this is a prairie warbler.
Yeah, absolutely. Prairie warblers can be kind of tough. I've had them. I've seen them in the fall, and I've been confused by them in the fall. I'll just say
Oh yeah.
that they can be real brain birds because sometimes they don't show a ton of that. By brain bird, I mean a bird that kind of breaks your brain when you first look
Yep.
at it. Like you may know what it is, you may be familiar with the species, but for some reason, when you look at that bird, it kind of like you're for a few seconds you're kind of dumbfounded. And I've been dumbfounded by prairie warblers before, but
Mm-hmm.
as Greg says, this bird does have the shadow of its spring plumage, and this is a still photo, so there's only so much you can take from it in terms of behavior. But one of the things that you can also notice about prairie warblers is they do tend to bob their tail when they forage in these sort of places.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of warblers do it a little bit. Water thrushes famously. Kirtland's warbler is one that does it. But prairie
Mm-hmm.
warblers, they don't do it as avidly as a water thrush does it, or a palm warbler,
Right.
like constantly bobbing its tail. But every once in a while, every 3 or 4 seconds, it's going to do a little dip there as it's moving around. And that's another thing that you'll notice when you're looking at a fall prairie warbler. When you're looking at a prairie warbler in any
At
season,
all.
you'll
Yeah.
be doing that.
And Wayne
Yeah.
Klockner on Facebook points that out. Says look for the tail pump or flick.
Hmm.
And uh, yeah, we had one at Montrose. You're talking about a brain bird. We had one at Montrose just recently that a lot of people saw, and then somebody got a really good look at it and realized it was a Magnolia Warbler.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not always that straightforward. Like Nate
Hmm.
said, it can be tough. But once you get
Yeah,
a good look,
Magnolia Warbler. Magnolia Warbler is one that you can confuse for Prairie Warbler pretty easily. Magnolia Warbler tends to have a
mm-hmm,
full eye ring, like a full white eye ring, as opposed to the sort of broken off-white one. They're a little different shaped too. Magnolia Warbler is a very lanky, long-tailed warbler, very thin in
mm-hmm,
the body, whereas this one's a little more compact. And
yep,
the obviously the tail pattern in a Magnolia Warbler is going to be a clincher in all
exactly,
seasons.
exactly. All right, moving on.
Oh, another
Now,
warbler.
another warbler.
Greg.
What I like about this picture is, like the prairie warbler. Well, there's two things here that could throw you off. One is that pale eye, which just kind of looks weird. And where it is, I mean, it's obviously down low in the flowers.
Huh.
So
Yeah. Yeah, these are not natural flowers, I don't think. This looks like
no,
someone's
it's somebody's
someone's
garden.
garden. Yeah.
But what we can see here is, well, start at the bottom. It's got kind of a white belly. Um, Hard to tell what the feet and legs look like, but it looks kind of like it has pale feet and maybe black legs. It's got a
Hmm.
yellow breast and throat with some kind of messy
Yeah,
coloration
a
at the
necklace
top
or
of the
something.
breast, like a little necklace or something. Um, it's molting, so it's hard to tell what the wings
Yeah,
look
it's
like, but
messy.
it looks like it has some wing bars, um, and then a green patch on the back. That is also very subtle, but I mean, you can see it.
Yeah, this is one of the difficulties of identifying birds from photos in particular is because photos can be overexposed or underexposed, and sometimes they're blurry, and these are the sorts of things that you don't necessarily see when you see a bird in the field. The lighting at least tends to be pretty stable. But yeah, as Greg points out, there are a lot of things in here that will definitely lead us to the proper identification. Um, the
Now,
kind of
the one,
round body, the kind
mm-hmm,
of perky tail, the necklace in
the
particular.
necklace in
Uh,
particular.
yeah. When I see a bird like that with a necklace like that, it's sort of all round. I immediately think of northern parula, which is
Yes,
what this bird is, or
yes,
perula, or parula, or however you
Perula.
want to pronounce it. There's no right or wrong way to pronounce it, I don't believe. Or is there, Greg? You
Hey, I don't
do you
know.
know?
I mean,
I
just
don't
like
know.
with plover, I say it
I
a
like to
bunch of
switch it
different
up.
ways just to mess around with people.
Yeah, I'll switch it
Um,
up.
but
Yeah, but please.
I was just to say the eye, because that
Hmm.
tends to jump out to me is the
Yeah.
backlighting of birds. All right, so if you look in the field guides, you'll see this bird along with many others. They just have a black eye, and it's
Hmm.
painted, and in most photographs, it's a black eye. But when you've got strongly backlit like this, and the light is refracting around inside the eye, it kind of illuminates the iris, and you can see that it's actually very, very dark brown, and it lightens it up and gives the impression of a bird with a light eye, even though it really doesn't.
Yeah,
And
this bird
I've
looks like it
seen,
has one of those googly eyes that you can stick on
yes,
things on it.
and
But
we've
it is
seen
the
that.
dark eye, as you say, and the eye
It
ring
is,
as well. Yeah.
and we've seen that in what's this bird a few times. There was one, I think it was a female common redstart, or American
Mm.
redstart, sorry, a female American redstart, that looked. I mean, the eye looked almost as white as a young white-eyed vireo,
Hmm.
and it just looked really bizarre. But it
Hmm.
was just the way the light was bouncing around inside the eye because it was so backlit.
Yeah, I always hesitate to make presumptions about photos like this because you're never really sure exactly what is a photo artifact and what is actually there. But one of the useful field marks of Perula, is
Perula.
that they alone among our common North American warblers has a bicolored bill. So the
Oh
top upper
yes,
mandible is dark and the lower mandible is kind of an orangey yellow. And in a photo
the
like
bill
this, you
just looks
almost
white
wonder.
here.
It almost I think you can see a little bit.
You
I'm
can.
using my mouse and no one can see what I'm pointing out with my mouse. But you can see the mandible, the base of the mandible there is yellow like the chin. And
Yes.
Perula is our one. Well, the other Perula as well. Tropical Perula does this as well.
Right.
But our two Perula warblers are the ones that show this. And if you're in the place where you're looking at a warbler, which is typically a little tiny, extremely active warbler that can be very high up in a tree. If you're looking up at this bird, you're going to be able to see that color from the chin kind of merge into the lower mandible, and then you'll know that you have a parula. Even when they don't show a necklace like this male bird, sometimes the females don't show much of a necklace at all, but they always
Right.
show the pale mandible.
Yep. Yep. All right.
I do have some questions from before we move on, and this maybe
Oh, sure.
it's related. Some questions from YouTube. M. Pothig asks, she's a new birder, lives near the Chesapeake Bay. Would like to get some advice on where to go and when to know shorebirds. Well, some people have noted shorebirds. She says all these birds, all tips are welcome. But folks in the comment section have focused on shorebirds, and rightly so, as Chesapeake Bay is a pretty amazing shorebird migration funnel this time of year as the birds are moving south. Um,
Absolutely.
as far as perching woodland birds, just about anywhere you go in the fall is going to have something. I would focus on those woodlots, the edges of woodlots, especially if you're out in the morning, places where the sun hits early in the
Mm-hmm.
morning because it warms those bugs up, which warms the birds up. um, but as far as places around Chesapeake Bay, I think it would be harder to name places that aren't good for birds in that area this time of year.
Yeah. Yeah, but and as we as we started out here, uh, warblers fall migration for passerines is just getting
Just
started,
we're on the
but
beginning of that.
shorebirds are ramped up full. So
Yeah. Hmm.
spend the time with these birds while you got it, because they move
Yeah.
through fairly fast, and they're on their way. They're traveling a long distance. So spend time with these shorebirds while you can. And one thing to note with the shorebirds is that right now most of what we're seeing are adults, and these are
Hmm.
worn adult birds. And I think we have some shorebirds coming up later here in just a little bit.
Right.
But then after that will come the juveniles, the birds that
Hmm.
were born this year. And the plumage is subtly different, and it's a really good. August is a really good time to get familiar, just like with the fall warblers, to
Yeah.
get familiar with that.
Yeah, I was out the other day at a reservoir arm that has a trail that runs to it that's quite close to my house that I can get out to in about 10 minutes, and it's traditionally a really good shorebird place in my area. And there wasn't a ton there, but definitely least sandpipers are in, a lot of least sandpipers around.
Mm-hmm.
Spotted sandpipers, the stuff you'd expect. Right now in the southeast, we're still on the shorebirds are concentrated in other places. A lot of waders around. I know Euro birders might be confused by that. They call their shorebirds waders, but by waders I'm talking about herons and egrets.
Yeah.
So we get post breeding dispersal of things like snowy egret and little blue heron and things like that.
We have a question in Facebook. Ray Finney, I hope I am pronouncing your name correctly, Ray, says he lives in St. Paul, Minnesota, and was hoping to see the ABA bird of the year, which is burrowing owl. If he were to drive, where would be the best and closest place to try to get this bird? I will say
Right
here that
now,
yeah, I mean, I would say that eBird is your friend. Look at the
yeah,
eBird.
I was just pulling up eBird on my other screen.
Look at the eBird
I'm
map,
looking for burrowing
and
owl.
filter the dates out to this month. So everything will be within the last 12 days. I am going to guess somewhere in North Dakota, maybe South Dakota, might be
South
closest
Dakota
for
looks
you.
like it's got a few. So around Sioux Falls. Some have
Hmm.
been seen. Blue Mounds State Park in southwest Minnesota looks like it's got a few. Touch the Sky
Oh,
Prairie National Wildlife Refuge
I didn't know
in
that
Rock
bird. I didn't
County,
know that bird.
Minnesota.
I didn't know that species bred in Minnesota.
It's extreme southwestern Minnesota, it
Yeah.
looks like.
Well, there you go,
Yeah,
Ray.
there you
You
go.
could get it as a state bird as well there.
That's right. But you'd probably be more likely once you get a little bit further west
Yeah.
into around, oh, I don't know. I'm looking in South Dakota, Yankton, uh, Crow Creek Reservation. Yeah, that
So there
area,
you go.
the middle of the state. Yeah, eBird's your friend.
ebird.org/explore, and then go to the maps and use the
Hmm.
tools to filter, and that'll tell you where you can find them. So
Absolutely.
getting on to our bird here from Plum Island, Massachusetts.
Plum
What do you
Island,
see in there?
Massachusetts. This is a water bird. I can tell because there is water in the background.
Good
Um,
deduction.
it has very long pointed wings. It has a short forked tail,
Hmm.
shallow fork. It's got a long, thin, straight beak.
Sort of
Um,
spike-like.
yeah, I would say like a railroad spike, maybe a little
Hmm.
thinner. I would put this bird in the tern family, Greg, Sternidae.
I would agree. I mean, there are some small gulls that are very similar, but a couple of things that stand out. Well, actually, there's really only one thing that stands out that makes it a tern rather than a gull, and that is the bill shape. And it's that as you sort of mentioned there, the very straight and, as I said, kind of spike-like bill is unlike any gull. It's longer. The small gulls that might look like this with a short forked tail, they tend to have shorter bills, and they just don't give this impression. And
There are some tern-like gulls and
yes,
alternately some gull-like terns. Actually, I think the tern-like gulls
and
are more like terns than the gull-like terns are like gulls.
and then
I'm not
there
sure
is the
that came
gull
out right.
build. Then there is the gull
Gull-billed
build
tern.
turn,
Yeah.
which takes it to the max.
Yeah. That's got a big old bill.
It's got a big
Big
old
old bill
honking
for
bill.
crushing crabs.
Yeah. Um, so the field marks that seem to stand out on this bird are the head pattern,
Hmm.
um, and it's just kind of overall kind of gray and white. And like you said, it's got a short tail. We can see a little
Hmm.
bit of the upper wing on the distal wingtip there. It doesn't look like there's too much of a pattern going on.
No, pretty much just
The
gray.
tail, the tail does. The other thing that stands out to me is that sort of big splotch where the wing meets the body at the
Yeah, on the shoulder
forward
there.
edge,
Yeah.
and that big splotch is a key field mark for this species at this time of year.
Yeah, terns are looking kind of rough this time of year. They look pristine and beautiful for about 2 weeks out of the entire year, and then as
Yep,
soon as they finish breeding, they immediately look like someone threw them in the garbage can.
yep,
And this is no different. But yeah, as you say, that big splotch on the front end of the wing, it doesn't have a cap,
right,
even a hint of a cap like
right,
some terns do, and it's got a big old black spot on the back
hmm
behind the eye in the back of the face. Um, yeah, so this is, although it does not necessarily look like it, there's only one turn that it could possibly, well, two, but one is way more
Well, no,
likely.
yeah, but the splotch on the
The
breast
splash
there
on the
kind of.
back doesn't have it. Well, anyway, this is one of
Yeah,
our marsh terns. This is black tern, which breeds
yes,
across the interior of the continent and winters offshore to a great extent.
and
And
the
so that's
the
where I
very
imagine it would be in
rare
Plum Island.
the very rare white wing tern,
Hmm.
which, if a white wing tern was going to show up here at Plum Island, would be a
Plum Island's not a
pretty
bad
good,
place.
not a
Yeah,
bad place. But it wouldn't have that big dark splotch,
is that right?
uh,
Okay.
that shoulder spur. Yeah, you know what?
Hmm.
I say things like that, but just to be sure, let's
Yeah,
find
pull it out.
out.
I use my
Uh,
app.
because nobody can remember everything. Well, there's a couple people I know who can, but I'm not one
Well,
of
it's
them.
reasonably to believe that a black tern is going to be your. I mean, white wing tern is extremely rare in the ABA area, though. It seems like yeah, the
Yes, I did
black on the
remember
head
that
is much more
correctly.
limited. Yep, you're
Yes,
correct, Greg.
but I did remember the spur correctly. So
Yep,
there we go. Point for me.
yep. This looks like a juvenile black tern, so this would probably be a
Yeah, it
bird that
does.
hatched this past summer. Adult black terns have the pattern on the head and the pattern in the front of the wing, but they don't have that kind of tan beigey color
Right.
that is sort of between it. Is probably extending all the way into the back, though we can't really see the back.
Yeah.
A lot of terns have that. It's the feather tips
Right.
essentially, and those will wear off as the fall wears on, so that you won't really see much of all at all of that color
Yes.
later in
And
the
and
fall.
and one of the things is, a photo like this, if we really look at, well, we don't have to blow it up to look at it. We can kind of tell is that it's
Hmm.
it's blurred. It's motion blurred, and it
Yeah.
may be a little focus blurred as well. And
Hmm.
so that sort of
Hard to get the
beigey,
autofocus on a turn sometimes.
yeah, that gray beigey area in between the shoulder spur and the markings on the head is actually white feathers with very fine beigeish
Hmm.
edges on the tips that makes that color. And then over time, the beige tips wear off.
Hmm. Yep, into
So,
that kind of more classic black and white that we
yep.
expect from our turns, even our black turn.
Okay, I'm gonna push the button.
Stephen Gollin in YouTube asks, the underwing is surprisingly light. on that bird. I'm trying to look at some photos. Yeah, I guess it is. A gray underwing is what you would expect in a Juve black tern. Hard to say how much of that is artifact or just
Yeah,
individual variation or whatever.
light bouncing off the water.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. That does happen.
I mean, we just looked at a northern Parula with a white bill because of lighting.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. It's really hard to tell exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
So this is a fun picture, and we'll get to
Yeah.
why
Which
exactly I
which
picked
bird
this
are
picture.
we identifying here, Greg?
Let's hit all of
Because
them.
there's a lot of options. A
Let's
lot
hit
of
all. Let's do the
options.
gull up front first.
Okay, so Antelope Island, Utah. I don't see anything particularly that stands out about this gull. It looks like pretty much a bog standard, large white-headed gull with yellowish legs and a medium-sized bill, not an overly large or overly small bill. I would guess that this is going to be the expected gull, Laris gull in this area, which would be
And a
the
dark eye.
California gull, right?
Yep, I agree. This is a California
Not the
gull. It's
Utah
got a
gull, the
dark
state
eye.
bird of
It's
Utah.
state exactly. It's got a dark eye, which even in this photo, which is again a little bit blurred, a little bit soft focus, the other yellow-legged gull that might be found in Utah this time of year, ring-billed gull,
Mhm.
would have a very glaring yellow eye
Yeah,
in
I
this
think you would
plumage.
even be able to see that even in this photo, which is not, a super
Yeah,
high quality of that bird. I think you would be able to see that, and it would have a little more black on the bill too.
yes, it would.
The eponymous ringed bill.
So let's get to the four birds directly and to the left behind. Uh,
Okay.
they all
Okay.
kind of look the same.
Yeah, they're
Um,
shorebirds. They're
mm-hmm,
sandpipers.
mm-hmm.
They're plump. They're largely white and gray without a ton of pattern. That's kind of difficult to tell what's going on here with
Very
these
pale.
photos. Very pale, very long, thin bill. Looks like they have pale colored legs. Um, Status and distribution is your friend here, so I do kind of have an idea of what is going on in Utah this time of year. There's a big molt migration of shorebirds
Mm-hmm.
that come to the Great Salt Lake. Antelope Island is in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, and they take advantage of the brine flies, the little flies that buzz around here, and they just get really fat before they move on the rest of their fall migration. This
So
shape is really distinctive.
yes, and that's what I was going for here. Is
Yeah.
that we've got three birds in the front, but especially the bird at the left. So if we count from
Yeah.
right to left, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one that's furthest to the left is in this sort of crouching, leaning forward, looking at something, about to pick it
hmm
pose. And you can see the other two birds, especially the bird on the far right, is in the same pose. And if we look at our Sibley guide here, can I point to it? Yeah, it's right here under my finger. We see that David
He's
Sibley
illustrated the
paints
bird.
illustrates that pose, which is really a good field mark for Wilson's phalarope, which is what those four
Wilson's
birds are.
phalarope. Phalarope is
When they
tricolor.
are out moving about, they do that all the
Yeah.
time. And there are other whitish shorebirds like this that could be confused with a Wilson's phalarope, but once you see them moving around,
Yeah.
there's no question.
Yeah. So I live in a place where Wilson's phalarope is a regular but rare fall migrant. They turn up every year in North Carolina, but you can't be guaranteed to get one every year. And when you're out on a mud flat and you're looking through those birds, the behavior of the Wilson's phalarope and the fact that it is just a little big, plump, white shorebird really stand out amongst every other shorebird that's out there. So when you've got a phalarope, you can usually tell from a pretty long distance away that you've got something interesting. Now you do have to split between the phalaropes because there are some other phalaropes, and I think we'll get to that here, Greg, very shortly.
Yes.
But Wilson's is big chunky phalarope, very distinctive even among the three phalarope species that we have in North America.
Mm-hmm. And then the four birds to the left of the four Wilson's phalaropes. Now, if you go through the books or your on the guide on your phone, you'll notice that the phalaropes are depicted as swimming, and they're interesting sandpipers, and a couple of species, the red and red-necked, formerly northern phalarope, actually spend winter out at sea, and live on the ocean, picking up little bits and things.
Almost entirely pelagic. Yeah.
Almost, yeah. And so the four birds to the left there are one of those two species. And again, status and distribution is your friend here. Antelope Island, Utah is one of the best places to see red-necked phalarope in the ABA area. It's a staging ground for them. And that's what those four birds on the left are. Those are red-necked phalaropes.
Yeah. And red-necked from red phalarope is a difficult identification sometimes. And I don't know, knowing what we can see with this photo, if we would necessarily be able to tell completely. I mean, there are some things that suggest red-necked over red. The kind of splotchy black and gray on the back. Red phalarope tends to be more kind of plainly gray on the back. It has a much shorter kind of batony bill, red phalarope does, and these bills do look kind of long, but it's difficult to tell from what we're looking at here.
It is, and it's the name for red phalarope in the UK is gray phalarope, and that's because in the fall and winter it is gray, and doesn't have, I think the far left bird, I can see a little bit of suggestion of the buff striping that's a key field mark going down the back. So these are red-necked phalaropes on the far left.
You can definitely see they're much different the way they move on a mud flat, the way they move around, than a Wilson's phalarope, which tends to be a much more active feeder than a redneck phalarope.
Yeah, I mean, and Wilson's phalarope are just comical. They run around, they do those little crouches. I mean, it almost looks, those of you who are old enough to remember the Monty Python Ministry of Silly Walks, I mean, that's what a Wilson's phalarope looks like. They're just silly.
Yeah, there's a good question from El Bauer on YouTube. Asks, is that posture on all phalaropes? And I assume you're talking about the posture with the redneck phalaropes in the back of this photo. And that is actually one of what makes rednecked and red phalarope a more difficult identification, because they do tend to look similar on the water, look similar on a mud flat, whereas Wilson's phalarope is much more distinctive.
Yeah, and Wilson's phalarope, if you were talking about the Wilson's phalarope, that sort of crouching, sort of lunging forward kind of look is pretty much unique to Wilson's phalarope. Any shorebird, lesser yellowlegs, can do that, of course, but Wilson's phalarope does it habitually. And when you see them running around on a mud flat or belly deep in the water doing that, the other thing that we can't see here is the phalarope that's furthest out in the water. We see it drawing a wake there. They spin like little tops in the water that supposedly stirs up things that they can find to eat. But when you see a lot of them in the water and they're all spinning around like little tops, that's another sure sign that you have a bunch of phalaropes.
Yeah, they create a little vortex. What about that bird in the far upper right corner? You want to go for that one?
I don't
know what that is. I can't tell whether it's a phalarope or a small gull.
I just guessed it was another redneck phalarope, but
I'd go with that. I don't have any reason to disagree with that.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to push the button again. Oh,
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, look at this bird. We've got kind of a very slim, looks like just an overall gray bird with a long tail, kind of short wings, and boy, it looks like almost a finch-like bill.
Yeah, it's definitely well, it's hard to tell. We got a little foreshortening going on here, which makes even long things look a lot shorter. They are, but it is thick on the base, and I think that's fair. Big ol' eyes. That's what really stands out to me on this thing. His eyes are huge.
And the thing that really stands out to me here, well, there's two things, and one of those is why I picked this picture. But the thing that stands out to me here is the black forehead. So that what's kind of called the front sometimes on a bird, or on a dog it's called the stop. It's the right where the nose meets the forehead. That forms almost this very big gray, almost spectacle around the eyes in front. And there's only a couple of our birds that have that, and only one in Pennsylvania. And that one is Tufted Tit Mouse.
Yep, the familiar little Tufted Tit Mouse.
And as Nate said, the foreshortening makes this bird's bill look thicker and shorter than it is. And gray catbird would be the other one, but the gray catbird, even in messed up juvenile plumage, still has a dark cap that kind of bisects the eye, or does it go under the eye? I can't remember. But
a little bit over, but it's close.
It doesn't go around or over the eye like this and kind of form a spectacle.
And also a gray catbird would have a brick red undertail coverts, which you can see very well on this bird, which are pale on this bird.
Which are pale on this bird, and even a young bird.
A little surprise that a catbird has.
It would have a hint. It would have a hint of that rusty undertail covert that would be covert. That would be very noticeable. But the reason that I picked this picture, just because it's interesting, because it's a tufted tit mouse. We can't see the tuft. The bird has its crest down and it's looking right at us, so we can't see.
Looking a little ratty too.
And it looks a little ratty.
Late summer mess.
This time of the year, exactly, late summer mess. But look at that bug. It's got bright red bug with spotted wings. And in Pennsylvania, that bug is spreading like crazy. That is a spotted lanternfly. And those of you in the East, if you see that bug, squash them. That is an invasive bug that's causing all kinds of problems. And they're easy to kill. Just smash them.
Another thing, Susan Nelson points out, little tufted tit mice are so loud, or mouses, I don't know what a plural of tufted tit mice is, are loud compared to their size. They never shut up. Yeah, I mean, I love a tufted tit mouse because you've got to appreciate a bird that can run through its entire full range of vocalizations. And they have a really impressive range of vocalizations with its mouth completely stuffed with food.
Yeah, it could have like... three sunflower seeds in.
I know, that's what I've seen it. Yeah, just so stuffed and still Peter up in the trees. Stephen Williams asks, do tufted tit mouses
Yeah, we're not going
migrate here in Tennessee? All of a sudden have trees full. They might do a little bit of seasonal movement that maybe we don't appreciate because we don't really pay too much attention to it in places where tufted titmouse are quite common. I think part of the reason why you might have a lot of tufted titmouse around right now is that they move in family groups, right?
Exactly.
So the chicks from the summer's nest will hang around with their parents for a long time, maybe even through the winter, where they become kind of the core of those mixed species flocks that we see throughout the winter across the Southeast. I bet those are family groups moving around, and they're constantly chattering with each other, so it makes you feel like there's a lot of them around.
Exactly, and that's a lot of birds that are sedentary, and especially Paridae, like titmice and chickadees and nuthatches, and nuthatches aren't the same family, but those kinds of sedentary woodland birds that we think of as resident. This time of year, as Nate said, they will travel around in family groups. So where you only saw one or two, suddenly in August you see 5 or 6.
5 or 6, yeah, exactly.
And then over the course of the winter, those young birds will disperse. So then you still see a little bit more of the young birds. Then the next spring they set up their territory, and we're back to seeing 1 or 2 in a local spot.
Yeah.
Whack those lanternflies, people, if you see them.
You can keep a little notebook with you can take keep track of how many lanternflies you're killing. Maybe you can paint them on like the side of a fly swatter or something,
There you
like a
go.
World War One flying ace. Keeps track of their kills.
Put them on the side of your doghouse.
That's right. A hammer.
Okay. This is from Houston, Texas, and we've got a flock of birds that look, I mean, formation that could be geese. I mean, look at these big dark birds with long wings. You know, I don't think they're storks or anything like that, because look at the necks look short. Nate, I'm seeing legs sticking out here,
Or a tail. I think these are magnificent
tail.
frigate birds, Greg.
Oh, geez, I didn't even go there.
Yeah. No, but yeah, I think you're right.
We're getting to the loopy,
we're going in the weeds there.
Loopy part of the program here.
That's right. Yeah. So what we're looking at here are, I think that your impulse is right. These are wading birds. These are herons. Those are their legs sticking way out.
Those are now. One thing before we get into that, the shape of the wings. You see that sort of forward-reaching long wing with a thin, tubular body. That just screams heron to me.
Yeah, it really
Heron or
does. It
egret.
really does.
And once you see them flying around a little bit, you pick up on that shape, and it's just very distinctive. But it looks like there's two species here. What's going on there?
Oh man, yes, we've got some dark ones and some light ones, which is not an uncommon sort of thing you see with wading birds in North America. Because,
absolutely,
for starters, we have Reddish Egret, which famously has both a dark phase and a light phase. Great blue heron has a dark phase and a light phase, although some people think that light phase might be a full species. And little blue heron is another species that changes color through its life. The young birds are white, whereas the adult birds are kind of dark, rich, slate bluey purple color. So any of those could be possibilities here, Greg.
Yeah, and there is all right, so the one thing we can notice is that these birds are all the same size.
And roughly the same shape, too.
And the same shape. They have the same amount of legs sticking out. The neck is the same. But there is one field mark here, and the reason I picked this image is because of that field mark, and that is it. These are little blue herons, but that is on the two white birds. We can just see, and if you look closely, you can see the very small but distinctive dark tips on the primary feathers. And Sibley, again, does a really good job of pointing this out. It's a difficult field mark to see, but in a situation like this, where you've got a good photograph of the birds overhead, you can clearly see the individual feather tips. That is unique to juvenile little blue heron.
Yeah, and there's the fact that you're seeing so many of them together is a good clue for little blue heron too. I don't know that I've ever seen more than like two reddish egrets together in one place.
Well, actually,
unless there's a rookery, I don't know.
Outside of a rookery, but strangely enough, the only time I've ever seen more than one or two reddish egrets together was kind of far up on the Rio Grande, kind of near Falcon Dam, which was quite unusual. But snowy egrets, reddish egrets, they don't tend to fly in flocks like this. Whereas little blue herons definitely do.
They definitely do.
They roost together, and they fly back and forth from the roosts. ABA at our headquarters used to have a nightly little boat trip out to the little blue heron roost to watch them fly in by the hundreds.
And so you'll also see, a little bit later in the summer, you'll start seeing the white birds start growing in those dark feathers, and so you'll get these sort of piebald individuals
calico,
that are about half and half, and a mix of dark feathers and light feathers, and those are really cool looking birds.
And I don't think we're going to figure out a way to pitch Larkwire today, but I will. I will pitch the Sibley app, which is my favorite. If you don't have it for your phone, I highly recommend you get it. It's very, very good.
It's useful. I have the older like version 1 and I still use it all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Okay, hitting the button again. We got a couple more to get to. This
Kansas.
this every August we get this bird. Look at this. I mean the pattern and everything on this bird. I mean it looks strikingly familiar. And if this bird were in real life in front of us, its habits and habitat and everything else is, oh, I know
Sound
what
it
that
makes.
is, and the sound it makes until it turns around and you get a look at it like this, and especially in kind of blurry, over processed photo like this.
Mhm.
Um, so go
I mean,
go
it's
Nate.
a large bodied bird. It's very plump. It's got kind of a very sturdy, strong legs. So this is a bird that spends a fair bit of time on the ground. Relatively smallish head compared to the body. It's got kind of a uh, straight bill. Whenever I see spots like this on a bird, I immediately think of two groups of birds, and that is thrushes and thrashers. Those are the two
Mm-hmm.
birds that you're likely to encounter in like what appears to be a suburban yard, um, in a place that have all those spots on there. I don't
Yeah.
know of any thrashers are pretty distinctive. They have a very, very long tail, and especially, in this photo, you can't really see the tail very well, but you would be able to see that kind of strong curved bill that you
Yeah.
associate with things like brown thrasher. This bird does
And
not have that.
it wouldn't
Um,
have the face pattern. The
no,
face
the face
pattern is
pattern, the
kind
plain
of
face.
unique.
Yeah.
Um, but just look at the shape of this bird and imagine, the robin that you see in your yard. Um, just from the shape, just from the silhouette. Squint at this, and you'll see it's an American robin, but it
Hmm.
is a fresh juvenile.
Yeah, very
With
fresh.
all of the spots and the malar stripe and the mustache stripe and the eyebrow,
Yep.
that quickly get lost. And the bird, by September, October, will look much more like its parents.
Yep. Yeah, I have juveniles in my house as well, so I know how fresh they can get. And this bird is definitely a fresh juvenile American robin. That was a kid's joke. I don't know if anyone picked that up. Anyway, American robin is a thrush, in the
Yes.
same family as wood thrushes and all the Cathars thrushes that we have, and even the kind of the old world. And when they're young, that's when their thrushiness definitely stands out most. All of the thrushes that are in North America have a very spotty juvenile plumage. Bluebirds do
Yes.
as well.
Yep.
Townsend solitaire as well.
Yep.
They all have this spotty. They all betray their thrush origins when they are very young, and then they grow out of it pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, okay, I think we're on our last bird for the day,
Yeah, another
and
young one. Another young one.
yeah, this one comes to us from Georgia, and it's a as you said, it's another young bird. How can we tell? Well, we can't really from this photograph. I mean, Nate and I just kind of know it's a young bird because we know what it is. But
Yeah, right. Well, it's very
if
streaky.
you looked at
Young
the
birds
field
tend to
bird,
be a lot more heavily patterned than
pine siskin is pretty streaky.
that's.
Um,
I don't know if I'd expect to see a pine siskin in Stockbridge, Georgia, in the middle of summer, though
well,
it's not
that's
completely impossible.
not completely impossible.
Yeah.
But you are correct. Status and distribution is always something to pay attention to. And this species right now, all over the ABA area, there are young, well, not all over, but in a lot of the ABA area. Uh, this species has young all over the place, and they are confusing, and we get a lot of them every year in August. And it's streaked all over the place. It's
Yeah,
kind
this
of
is
cute
actually a really tough
looking.
one.
It's got kind of a short conical sparrow like beak. I think
Hmm.
most birders, by the time you get to the point where you're actually out there looking at birds, even if you don't know what they are, you kind of know a sparrow from a robin just based on the
Yeah,
general shape of the bill and overall kind of compactness of a sparrow. This one's got kind of a long tail.
yeah,
um, but just as with the warblers, as Nate pointed out at the beginning, we can definitely see a hint of the adult plumage here that gives this bird away.
Hmm. Yeah, it's got a pretty significant cap right there.
It does.
So we're gonna focus on that. It's got a little bit of some wing bars.
Hmm.
It's got an eye line. That's
It's got a
another clue right
it's
there.
got dark lores, which is the space between the eye and the bill,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
So, when you see a young bird like this, it's always useful to go to your common species of your area. And there is one species of sparrow, which I would absolutely expect to see in a suburban yard in Stockbridge, Georgia, even though I don't know exactly where Stockbridge, Georgia is. That is our familiar chipping sparrow, which has a
absolutely.
cap, which has an eye line, I should say, rather, which has a kind of a grayish breast and a dark back and a long tail. Yes, you know that's a chipping sparrow. You start seeing the adult chipping sparrow in this bird, and yeah, that's what it is. It won't hold its plumage
Absolutely.
very long, so hopefully you won't be confused very long if you ever run
No,
into it.
and a couple of things about chipping sparrows this time of the year, as we talked about with the titmouse, they travel in family groups at this time of
Hmm.
year, and even though this one is down in the grass where you kind of expect to see a chipping sparrow, they often will feed in August and September. The whole group of them will go up high in the trees and pick insects or whatever they're getting up
Yeah,
there.
it's always
Um,
very confusing to see chipping sparrows at the tops of trees.
and they look
It
like
it yes.
warblers. You see the
Hmm.
streaks, and they're very, very confusing. So be aware of that. That you may find a flock of chipping sparrows 50 feet up in a tree feeding like
Yeah,
warblers.
yeah.
Um,
It's weird. Yeah.
yeah. So that is the birds for us for today. We've got just a couple of minutes here. If anybody's got something they want to talk about.
I got some questions I was kind of thinking about. I was noting in the YouTube. The YouTube is busy, busy today, thanks to that email blast that David Hartley
So
sent out. Thanks, David,
thank
for
our
that.
colleague David
Um,
Hartley.
there were a couple questions that I noted, and now I'm having trouble finding them. In the There was a question about grackles. Oh, there it is. Sarah Coffey noticed that grackles have been disappearing lately in the last couple of weeks. She lives in Madison, Wisconsin.
Aha!
It's the time of year when the grackles are
It's
starting to head south, and grackles love to, form big flocks as they move, and they just like grackles from all over will join these flocks as they keep continuing to move south until they become these massive 100,000 strong flocks of grackles that end up on the southern coastal plain where I
yeah.
live. And
Well, so where
yeah,
I
so
live, which is not far from that we're in
mhm.
Wisconsin, where they are, um, grackles breed in my neighborhood. They breed all over uh, the Chicago area, but particularly where I live. The grackle is a pretty common breeding bird, and all through the spring and summer, you see them. Just you see like one here or two there.
Hmm.
They
Yeah,
pop into your feeder and then they're gone. And then all of a sudden in August, I see every evening flocks of 30 to 50 flying over to roost
yeah.
along the river a mile to my west. And these are all young birds of the year. And there's, of course, some adult birds, but mostly young birds of the year. And they all flock up, hang out together, and then they'll all move south. So even though you may
Hmm.
not see them in the actual spot you're at, if you started driving around, you'd eventually run into them because they're
Find the
there.
grackle roost.
They're
Yeah,
just all hanging out together.
yeah. Yeah, Stephen Williams notes saw all kinds of blackbirds while driving through Arkansas last weekend. Yeah, that's where they're going.
That's where they're
As
headed.
the southeast hosts very large flocks, mixed flocks of all sorts of blackbirds. Tends to be grackles, red-winged blackbirds,
Mm-hmm.
cowbirds, rusty blackbirds. Rusty blackbirds segregate a little bit more than the others, but sometimes you can see them in those big flocks.
Yeah,
But yeah,
we see them out in the
red wings.
fields.
Do you see them out in
Uh,
the fields?
we do in the more in the spring than in the fall.
Hmm.
But you're right. The Rusties, the Brewers, when we do get them, when we get them in
Yeah,
small numbers, but the Brewers tend to mix in more with the Red Wings than the Rusties. The Rusties, like you said, they tend
yeah,
to segregate. Um, and if there is habitat around for them, they like kind of swampy wood
yeah,
edges.
exactly.
And if there's any of that habitat around or the edges of like around here drainage ditches that have tall trees along them, They love that kind of habitat, whereas the rest of the blackbirds will be out in the fields working, looking for grubs in
the
the
spent
fields.
spent agricultural fields. Yeah, the rusty
Exactly.
blackbirds where I live, they really like those impoundment. Those ponds that people create. They create down here when they have to like dam a river or whatever. I forget
Right.
the word is escaping me for the moment, but yeah, so they'll be kind of around the edges of those places, and they tend to be kind of swampy, flooded forest areas that they really love.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, we just ticked over the hour here, and I think
We
that
did
that
it.
is it for us. You guys, thanks for joining us today. And as Nate said in the beginning, this is our job, and we love doing it, and we love having you guys here. And if you enjoy what we do, please consider supporting us by joining the American Birding Association for a cup of coffee a month, $2.50 a month. You can be a full-fledged member of the ABA and get access to all of our publications
Upgrade the first time that
online
time.
and all the cool new stuff that I said's coming down the pipe. aba.org/join. We'd love to have you come join the club and
Absolutely.
and do some birding with us.
And yeah, keep an eye out. We'll be back in a couple weeks. We tend to do this every other week. If you want a little bit of a heads up, please sign up for the ABA's newsletter, Flight Calls, and we usually put a note in there whenever we're the day before we do these things, so you'll make sure not to miss them. But we'll be back in a couple weeks.
Let me,
I think
I'll
be back in a
just
couple weeks.
before we bug out of here, I am going to just drop for all of you watching, if you're going to do that now in Facebook.
Oh yeah, and then
I
I'll
am
move it
going
over
to
to
drop
YouTube.
the link to the newsletter sign up form right there. Nate, if you want to drop that in Twitter and YouTube for those people, I just copied it into the Facebook thing.
Got it.
But yeah, sign up for our newsletters. We have a fantastic, if you love to travel,
Oh, man,
especially
Facebook adds
internationally
so
for
much.
birding, we have some fantastic tours coming up. As a matter of fact, next month, Nate, you're going to Panama, and I think
I
there's a
am. I'm
few
going to be in
slots
Panama.
open.
There's a few spots available if you want to come with me. It will yeah. So it's the September 1st to the 11th down at the Canopy Tower, which will be extraordinary. I am extremely stoked to go down there. And
I'm
hopefully
extremely
join
jealous.
some folks. Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be good stuff.
All right, well, that's it for us, folks. So you guys have a good afternoon, and if you're going birding this weekend, good birding.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna try and get that. I don't know why the link is too long. I'm gonna hold on just one second. I'm gonna
Okay, you know
do
what?
the
Here, let me do
newsletter.
this.
There it is. I got it.
I'm
All
gonna
right.
drop it in.
Because I want to make sure I
Slack
get
for
it.
ya.
I got it. I put it on YouTube. All right, so you can
Okay,
join the
and-
you can get the newsletter if you like. There's all
Yep.
sorts of good news on there. All right,
Okay.
thanks
And with
everybody.
that, we're
Thanks,
outta
Greg.
here.
We're
Take it
out of
easy,
here.
guys.
That's for real. Yeah.